So that's what happens when you give your staff way too much freedom and you leave a photo you were tagged in over a decade ago on Facebook. So just want to give a shout out, and not really a thank you, but how could you, to the creative team. Thanks for that. Anyway, hey, tonight we're in our second week of this series that we're calling Crop and Filter. And if you missed last week, let me just fill you in. We're kind of using this imagery of cropping photos and filtering, or placing a filter on a photo. You know, photo cropping is about removing things that are undesirable or unnecessary. Cropping is really magical. And then there's placing filters on photos. Filtering, it's not really supposed to turn it into a verb, it's just really a noun, filter, but we're going to go with filtering tonight. Is all about adding things to your photos to make them better than they are. And so one is about removing that which is undesirable, and then the other is about placing on or adding things that are desirable. And so we're taking those ideas of cropping and filtering, and we're putting them in the spiritual realm, because as you saw last week, we're looking into Colossians chapter 3. And if you look into Colossians chapter 3, you see this language of putting off and putting on. It's really the idea of spiritual cropping, that there's things in our lives that are no longer necessary or should not be desirable in the lives of those who consider themselves followers of Jesus Christ. And so last week was all about spiritual cropping. If you missed it, I encourage you to get online, because there's certain things that are in our lives that we need to put to death or put off. There are things in our lives that need to, in a sense, be spiritually cropped. They just don't have a place in the lives of those who consider themselves followers of Jesus Christ. Tonight, we're talking about spiritual filtering. We're talking about the things that we should want in our lives as followers of Jesus Christ. We're talking about the things that we should add to our lives, the things that should be desired, the things that can be added that make our lives more beautiful and reflect Christ's glory more on the earth. So that's what tonight is about. Now, I said this last week, and I want to say it again. Okay, photo cropping and photo filtering, those things are really magical because they allow you to change reality, right? Being able to go into a photo and crop things out. I mean, you just saw with me, there are certain things that you can remove. You can change reality. When you go in and you add a filter to your photo, that's what you're doing, is you're adding something that really wasn't there, but you are changing reality. But when we talk about spiritual cropping or spiritual filtering, we're not talking about changing reality. We're talking about reality changing us. See, so many of us are living uninformed about our true reality in Christ. When you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, and Jesus Christ actually came into your life, things have changed. You might not look different, you might not feel different, but your life is wholly different. Because Jesus Christ has done a miraculous work in your life. And so what we saw last week is because of who we are, because of our reality, there are things that should get cropped out of our lives. What we're going to see this week is because of our reality in Christ, because of who we are, there are things that naturally should be added to our lives. We should, in a sense, filter our lives with different things to become more like Jesus. See, if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, then here is your goal. Here is my goal. Our goal, we want to look, live, and love like Jesus. That's it. Like, if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, that should be your aim, to look, live, and love like Jesus. And so that's why it's so important for us to look into Colossians 3 and to figure out the things that need to be cropped. And then we need to figure out the things that we need to filter our lives with so that we will look as much like Jesus as possible. So if you have a Bible, turn with me tonight to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3 is where we're going to be. Last week we made it through the first 10 or 11 verses. Tonight we're going to make it through verses 12 through 17. Last week, because it was all about spiritual cropping, we heard Paul tell us about five things in relationship to sex that need to be put to death, and then he talked about 5 different things in regard to our speech that need to be put off. That's spiritual cropping. Tonight, Paul is going to tell us what we need to filter our lives with, and he's going to use the language to put on. So here's what he says, verse 12. He says, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, put on compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." So all eyes on me. Let me tell you how I'm going to break down tonight. First, we're going to look in verse 12, and we're going to see our reality. Remember, we said that spiritual filtering is about being changed by reality. Verse 12 is going to remind us of our reality, being in Christ. And after we are reminded of our reality, we're going to look at our response to that reality. We're going to look at how we are to be changed by that reality. And the text is going to give us 7 things that we need to filter our lives with. Some of you just freaked out because you're like, 7 things? This dude usually does 3 or 4, and he normally goes long. So just to be clear, we're going to move quickly tonight. And if I don't make it to all 7, we'll throw some out. But that's the goal tonight. So look with me. Verse 12, track along. Be a note taker tonight. Because what I want you to see is this text is all about human relationships flourishing. You're about to leave Aggieland. You're about to go home for an extended break with your family, your friends, your siblings. And so you need to be prepared to love well over the break. I assure you, you will need this text over the break. Paul informs us of our reality in verse 12. Listen to what he says. He says, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved." So let's just stop there and unpack that real quick. Because Paul's saying, here's your reality. You are God's chosen ones. You are holy and beloved. What you need to understand about that is those 3 things, God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, those were all references to the nation of Israel in the Old Testament. And then all 3 of those things were made in reference to Jesus Christ in the New Testament. And now all 3 of these things are applied to us as God's people. What's the point? Here's your reality. You are, if you have put your faith in Jesus Christ, you belong to God's people. You are one of God's children. You're his son or you are his daughter. You are one of God's people. And so here's the reality. As God's people, we should seek to live like God's people. Makes sense? Last week we said Jesus is our life, so we should make Jesus our life. This week we're saying we are God's people. As God's people, we should live like God's people. If we are God's people, we want to look, live, and love like God's people. Now, I want to make sure that you see the wording, because Paul isn't just speaking to us individually, he's speaking to a community. Did you see it? He said, "Put on then as God's chosen ones." He doesn't speak individually and say, as God's chosen one. He says, as God's chosen ones. What you need to understand is that when God called you to himself and you put your faith in trust in Jesus Christ, Jesus didn't just save you from your sin. He saved you into a community. More specifically, he saved you into a family. And so one pastor says it this way: your relationship with God must always be personal, but never private. So your decision to follow Jesus was an individual decision with implications that impacts an entire community, because you were saved into a family, which means anyone who considers themselves a Christian is now your brother or sister in Christ. And here's the deal: God cares about how his kids get along. Just like I care about how my 3 boys get along. God cares about how his kids interact with one another. Jesus is actually going to tell us how we treat each other says everything about us. He says this in John 13:35. He says, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." You see that? Like, people will be able to look and say, oh, you must belong to Jesus because of how you love other people. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." What's Jesus saying? He's saying, you know what? If you're part of the family, what you do is you make peace. God's saying, this is what my kids do. In this family, we're peacemakers. Why? Because Jesus is the ultimate peacemaker. He left heaven and came to earth to take us who were enemies and make us children. So as children, we seek peace. So don't miss what I'm telling you. I need you to understand that our witness for Christ can often rise and fall based on how we treat each other. As God's people, we should live like God's people. We have to learn how to interact with each other in a way that honors God and honors one another. And so what Paul is going to do is he's going to give us 7 filters for our lives, so that as you leave and go into the Thanksgiving and Christmas break, you will be a blessing to others. Okay? So here we go, 7 filters for your life. The first one is this: filter your life with Christ's character. That's the first thing you want to filter your life with. You want to filter your life with Christ's character. Paul says this in verse 12. He says, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, put on compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience." So, remember last week he has 2 lists of 5. This week he gives us another list of 5, and he uses the wording "put on." Last week he used the wording "put off." It's in the Greek, the imagery is of putting on and taking off clothing. And so the point is, you should wear clothing that is appropriate for your reality. So I'll explain it this way, and no judgment here. This is a heart that swells, a heart that tells. This is just confessional time. Like growing up, the people in my family went to either Baylor or UT. So growing up, yeah, I told you, no judgment. I actually said that on the front end, people. Come on. Anyway, growing up, I had different clothing associated with Baylor or UT. So growing up, I would wear Baylor shirts. I would wear a UT hat. I know it's shameful. People, gosh, you're harsh. Okay. But then I got into Texas A&M, like God in his kindness shine light into darkness. He called me out of darkness into his marvelous light. Thank you so much. If you're listening right now and you're at Baylor or UT, we still love you, but just not on Saturdays. So anyway, when I got into A&M, it changed my reality. Like there was certain shirts, there was a certain hat that were just no longer fitting for my reality. They had to be put off. They had to be put away. They had to be thrown out. They had to be torched. And so then I came to Aggieland, and I spent my 4 years wearing tons of different t-shirts that reflected my reality, that I was a proud member of the Fighting Texas Aggie class of 2000 and old. So that is the way that it works. And what Paul is basically saying is, because you belong to Christ, you should put on or wear Christ. You talk about name brand clothing, like some of y'all wear H&M or Madewell or Zara, whatever you wear. Paul is saying, no, you wear Christ. Like, that's the name brand. That's the clothing that you want. You want to put on Christ. And he gives 5 different character traits. And all of these character traits have been perfectly fleshed out in the person of Jesus Christ. So he says, put on compassionate hearts. That literally means bowels of compassion. Bowels being where the seat of your emotions reside. It's a deep sensitivity to the needs and sorrows of others. He says, put on kindness. What's kindness? It's just goodness in action. It's being helpful and beneficial. It's being generous towards others. He says, put on humility. What's humility? It's simply having a realistic view of yourself. You're not puffed up and you're not self-deprecating. Just think about it. When pride and insecurity sit on 2 different ends of the spectrum. If you're prideful or arrogant, who do you think about most? Yourself. When you're insecure, who do you think about most? Yourself. At either ends of the spectrum, you are consumed with who you are or who you're not. Humility falls right in the middle, and humility is having an accurate assessment of yourself, freeing you up to focus on other people. He says, put on humility, and then he says, put on gentleness or meekness. One pastor explained it as strength under submission. So you picture a horse in battle. A horse in battle is strong and powerful, but it's also submitted to the warrior that rides it. So to be gentle or meek is to be strong, but submitted to the Lord. So in times of conflict with other people, you can be strong and honest and straightforward and truthful, but you can also be honoring and respectful, and you can bring about healing and peace. And then he says, put on patience. What's patience? That word in the Greek, it means long-tempered. It's the opposite of having a short fuse. It means that you're able to put up with someone who irritates you. It's a slowness to avenge wrongs. So just think about those 5 things. Going into the break, the Thanksgiving break and then the Christmas break, which of these are you going to need most when you leave and go home or wherever you're going? Which one of these things do you need most with your family, with your parents, with your siblings, with your friends? Which of these are you lacking right now? Which need work with your current living situation, with your roommates or with your friends here in Aggieland? Which of these have you struggled to exhibit toward your people? Here's what I want you to understand before we move on to the second point. I want to make sure that you understand this. Christ-likeness isn't automatic, but it is accessible. That's what Paul is telling us. It isn't automatic. Why do I say that? Why do I feel like you need to know that? Christ-likeness isn't automatic. What I mean by that is you're not just going to wake up on the break and have a compassionate heart and be really kind and humble and gentle and patient with your family. You won't just automatically wake up and be godly. It takes work. It takes focus and intentionality. It's like this. When you picture your future marriage, how do you picture yourself? Do you picture yourself miserable to be around? Like, do you picture your spouse being miserable being around you? No, you picture yourself being delightful. You picture your spouse loving being married to you. But what's going to happen between now and then? Like, if your roommates now struggle with you, what makes you think your spouse is just going to eat you up? They're just going to love being around you. What's going to change between now and then? You won't just naturally, even though you grow up physically naturally, that doesn't happen spiritually. It takes work. It takes intentionality. It's not automatic. So if you're going to go home and have a compassionate heart or be humble with your family, if you're going to be gentle or kind or patient, it will take work. It will take focus. It will take the Spirit of God moving in your life. It is not automatic, but it is accessible. Here's what that means. It means you can live a life that's pleasing to God. Often we look back and we say, you know what, even our righteousness is like filthy rags before God. That's true, but we have become the righteousness of Christ. You realize that, right? Like Jesus went to the cross to take our sin and give us his righteousness. You know what that means? It means God has given us a new capacity to actually live lives that are pleasing to him. Like you have that capacity because the Spirit of God lives inside of you and can bear his fruit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control through your life. So it is not automatic, but it is accessible. We can live lives that are pleasing to God. The first thing you need to filter your life with is filter your life. Filter your life with Christ's character. Number 2, filter your life with Christ's forgiveness. Look at what Paul says in verse 13. He says this, he says, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And so here's what Paul is doing, okay? Paul is saying the natural overflow of Christ-like character is forgiveness. Like when you have a compassionate heart, when you're humble, when you're gentle, when you're kind, when you're patient, when Christ-like character is evident in your life, you will forgive other people. So here's what that means. You can actually tell whether you are spiritually immature or mature based on your willingness to forgive those who have wronged you. And what Paul is telling us here is that we need to filter our lives with Christ's forgiveness. I remember sitting in a church service. It was around Christmas time, and this guy got up to give the announcements, and I will never forget. I mean, this happened over a decade ago, and I still remember him getting up, and here's what he said. He said he reflected on being at home with extended family for Christmas, and he said, I was able to sit there with all of my extended family and realize that there was no brokenness in my heart towards anyone. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, man, that sounds amazing. Like to just be able to look at the different people in your life and to just be like, I have no brokenness towards anyone here in this room. Like I'm at peace with everyone. Here's what I want to ask you to do. I want to just ask you to close your eyes for a moment. And if you don't, I can't see you, so you're good. But I just want to ask you to close your eyes. And here's what I want you to answer in the quietness of your own heart. Who in your life do you have some bitterness towards? Whose name do you struggle to hear mentioned? Like who wronged you? Who do you hate? If someone comes to mind, just listen again to Paul's wording. Here's what he says. He says, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against the other, listen, forgiving each other as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. The key word is the word must. Just with eyes closed, hear me say this. What Paul is telling us is that we have to have exit strategies for our bitterness and hate. You can look up at me now. I just want you to hear me say this. You know what? Forgiven people forgive people. Forgiven people forgive people. If you have experienced the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, then it's only right for you to extend that forgiveness even to those who have hurt you. James Dunn puts it this way. He says, it is the experience of having been forgiven which releases the generous impulses to forgive others. But you have to understand it makes no sense to refuse to forgive those who Jesus Christ has already forgiven. But remember, forgiveness is a choice. It's not a feeling. If you wait until you feel like forgiving someone, you'll never forgive them. Now, let me just say this. Some of you guys have been deeply wounded from someone in your life, like someone has seriously wronged you or hurt you. I can't speak to every scenario in this room. Let me just say this. You don't have to forgive today or even tomorrow, but you know what? You need an exit strategy for your bitterness or hate, because in the end, the person who will get hurt the most by your bitterness and hate is you. I assure you of that. Forgiven people forgive people. And then before we move on, I just want to make sure you saw Paul's wording. Listen one more time. He says, bearing with one another. What's his point? He's saying you're going to have to bear with people, and people are going to actually have to bear with you. Why? Because you're both imperfect. Like, have you ever thought there are people in your life who are having to bear with you? Like, has anyone ever told you that? Probably not. But I'm telling you, like, people have to bear with you, just like people have to bear with me. If you don't believe me, just ask my wife. Like, I'm an Enneagram 4, which means I can totally be moody. Like, I can absolutely be too sensitive. I most certainly sometimes have too high of expectations. So there are times where my wife has to bear with me. People will have to bear with you. If you don't think that people have to bear with you, if you don't think that you have any issues, that's your issue. Your issue is that you don't think you have issues. We just identified why people have to bear with you. That's what makes you a difficult person, is you don't think you're a difficult person. See, we all have issues in our lives. We all have to put up with one another. And so because of that, you know what? Everyone needs forgiveness. Everyone needs to be forgiven. And so I just want you to think about this. Is there anyone in your life right now, just here at school, that you need to just have a reconciling conversation with, to just sit down and ask for forgiveness or extend forgiveness to? Don't leave relationships undone here at school. Let's just do this together. We've done this before at Breakaway, but let's just say these words. Let's just say out loud the words, I'm sorry, and then say, I forgive you. Okay, here's the deal. If you don't know the last time that you've said the words, I'm sorry, then you're probably a difficult person to be friends with. I'm just shooting you straight, because you're an imperfect person, and so am I. And if you haven't said the words, I forgive you, lately, then it might be because you cut people out when they hurt you. And that too makes you a difficult person to be friends with. But remember, forgiven people forgive people. And our witness can rise and fall on the way that we treat one another. So we want to filter our lives with Christ's forgiveness. Number 3, we want to filter your life with Christ's love. Paul says this in verse 14. He says, above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. I want you to understand, Christ's love, it belongs with Christ's character. So the list of 5, love belongs there. But the reason that I separate it out into a whole different point is because that's what Paul does, and he makes it the virtue above all virtues. He's basically saying if you put anything on, make sure that you put on love. And he says that love binds all the things together. The imagery is possibly like an outer garment that holds all the other articles of clothing, all the compassionate hearts, kindness, humility. Love is what binds those things together. See, without love, none of those other virtues work. They all short circuit. That's why in the famous love passage, what does Paul say? He says, love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. We see 4 of the 5 words that Paul mentioned in verse 12. We see those in 1 Corinthians 13, and Paul is saying that's actually what love is. So Christ's character that we saw in verse 12, those things are actually an overflow of Christ's love in your life. The word for love in the Greek, it's the Greek word agape. It's that self-sacrificial love. It's not a feeling. It's love that moves people into action and looks out for the well-being of others, no matter the personal cost. What it is it is a conviction and a commitment to seeing individuals, families, and communities flourish. See, without love, compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience must either be faked or forced. These things just become a mere shadow of what they could be, and they become disciplines that drain you instead of acts of love that bring delight to your life. And so you want to filter your life with Christ's love. Number 4, you want to filter your life with Christ's peace. What does verse 15 say? It says, "And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful." So when Paul talks about the peace of Christ, he's not talking about a feeling. He's not talking about that feeling of like, you know what, I feel at peace right now. He's talking about a fact, your reality. That when Jesus Christ went to the cross, was put in the grave, and then walked out of it on the third day, what Jesus was doing is he was making peace between you and God. You were at war with God. I don't know if you realize that. Like if you're here tonight and you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you might be at war with God and you don't even know it. But what Jesus Christ did on the cross is he ended the war between us and God. So that when you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, here's how your reality changes. You were an enemy of God, and now you're a child of God. And so you have peace. Whether you feel at peace with God or not, if you know Jesus Christ, that is what Jesus has done, is he has brought about peace. So here's what Paul is getting at. It makes no sense to be at peace with God, but at war with God's people. Do you hear that? It makes zero sense to be at peace with God, but at war with his people. Paul tells us that the peace of Christ must rule in our hearts. That word rule in the Greek, it's the imagery of an umpire. And so what Paul is saying is that especially in times of conflict, like you automatically look to the umpire for the call. And the umpire in any conflict, Paul is saying the umpire is the peace of Christ. That when you're tempted in times of conflict to be manipulative, or when you're trying to control the situation, Paul says, no, you look down the first baseline. No, you look to the sideline. No, you look at the umpire and you look for the call. The umpire is the peace of Christ, and the peace of Christ must rule in your heart for you to be reminded, my greatest goal in this moment is not to win. My greatest goal is to be reconciled. Do you understand that? When it comes to relationships within the family of God, the goal isn't to be right. The goal is to be reconciled. Anytime you need to win, I promise you, you will lose. Anytime you need to win, a fight with your parents or your siblings or your friends, anytime you need to win, I promise you, you will lose something. You'll lose control, you'll lose respect, or you'll lose the relationship. And so I just want to ask you to think about this. Who are you at war with right now? Maybe that sounds too harsh. Let me just say this. Where's the drama in your life? Where's the drama in your life? Who's it with? Is it with your parents? Is it with your siblings? Is it with your frenemies? Like, where's the drama? You have to make a choice. You're either going to be the problem or the problem solver. Who are you going to be? You're going to be the problem, or are you going to be the problem solver? Paul encourages us to filter our lives with Christ's peace. Next, filter your life with Christ's word. Look at what Paul says in verse 16. He says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. Just real quick, I just want to touch on this. The word of Christ is referring to the scriptures. It's the Bible. It's the words that came out of Jesus' mouth. It's the teachings of Jesus and the teachings about Jesus. This book from cover to cover is about Jesus, from Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation 22. This book is about Jesus Christ. And what Paul says is, you let this word dwell in your life richly. What does that mean? It means for your life to, number one, be flooded with the word of Christ, and number two, for your life to be influenced and transformed by the word of Christ. And Paul isn't just talking to us individually, he's actually speaking communally here. What he's saying is that the dorms and apartments and families and sororities and churches should be committed to treasuring the word of God and being changed by it. So what's your relationship like with this word? I remember I used to work with a guy named Matt Freeman, and he used to say this often, and I hope you don't miss it. He would say this. He says, if I miss one day in God's word, I know about it. If I miss 2 days in God's word, my wife knows about it. If I miss 3 days in God's word, the whole world knows about it. What's his point? He's saying, how this book informs your life shapes who you are. And so what Paul is saying is, you want to filter your life with this book. You want to read it in, and you want to live it out. You cannot know God's ways without knowing his word. Let me just tell you this. The most loving thing that you can do for your family and for your friends is to be committed to hearing this word taught, hearing it, reading it, meditating on it, and applying it every day of your life. What will you do with this word over the break? So many people leave for the holidays, and man, you fall out of your spiritual routine. And so, man, the breaks can be really dry time spiritually. I know they were for me when I was in college. Make a decision from now, set a goal. What do you want to go through in this scripture? You know what I do? Man, I read one chapter a day, and as I read, I highlight. And after I've read through and I've highlighted, I walk through the passage and I pray through my highlights. I turn those highlights into prayer. Start there. Do that. Filter your life with Christ's word. Number 6, filter your life with Christ's name. Listen to what Paul says. He says in verse 17, he says, and whatever you do, this is a great verse to memorize. Whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. N.T. Wright explains that acting in someone's name means both representing him and being empowered to do so. Do you hear what that's saying? So when Paul says, whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, what he's saying is, you are representing Christ in everything you do. Because of your reality, because of who you are, that you are in Christ, you are hidden in Christ, because Jesus is your life, then everything you do should be filtered through the thought of, how does this represent Christ when I do this? With every word that comes out of my mouth, with every decision that I make, how do I represent Christ by doing this? So you begin to ask yourself the question, before I say this or before I do this, I am representing Christ. Is this helpful or hurtful to my witness for Christ? When I say this or when I choose to do this, Christ's name, because I call myself a follower of Jesus Christ, Jesus' name will be attached to what I'm about to do. Would Jesus want his name attached to what I'm about to do? When you go out on Thursday night, would Jesus want his name attached to what you're going to do? When you're with your girlfriend, would God want his name attached to what you're going to do? You begin to run everything you do through the filter of everything I do. I am filtering it with Jesus' name on my life, that I am representing him in every single thing that I do. When I study, how does this represent Christ? When I talk to my parents on the phone, how does this represent Christ? When I hang out with my friends, how does this represent Christ? And then last, filter your life with Christ's work. Filter your life with Christ's work. I don't know if you realize it, but you know what Paul mentions the most in these verses? He mentions Thanksgiving, which is fitting because we're about to go into Thanksgiving. Verse 15, what does he say? He says, and be thankful. Verse 16 says, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your heart to God. Verse 17, and whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. See, you know what gratitude is? Gratitude, thanksgiving, it's like lighter fluid to your relationship with God. The more thankful you are to Christ for what he's accomplished in your life, when you look back and you say, thank you, Jesus, for your compassionate heart, which fueled you to leave heaven and come to earth because you saw our needs for a Savior. Thank you for what you've done. You know what happens? As you see Jesus clearly, you want to show Jesus more clearly in your life. As you remember what Jesus has done for you, you're reminded of what you want Jesus to do in and through you. So you thank Jesus for what he's done. Thank you for your compassionate heart. God, give me a compassionate heart that I would want to meet the needs of others. Lord Jesus, thank you for your kindness, your goodness in action, that you would be crucified to a cross, that you would become sin for me, that you would be punished in my place. Thank you for your kindness, God. Would you give me kindness in my life, that I would see the needs of others, that goodness would be put into action, that I would be helpful to others, that I'd be beneficial to others. Jesus, thank you for your humility, that you were God, but you took on flesh. And instead of being worshiped as a king, you were crucified like a criminal. Thank you for your humility. God, give me humility in my life. May I see myself as you see me. Would you free me up from pride and insecurity so that I can just focus on others? Jesus, thank you for your gentleness, your meekness, that you are fully submitted to the Lord, that you are submitted to God, that in the garden you said, God, not my will, but your will be done. And yet on the cross, in power, you declared, it is finished, and then you were put in a tomb, and then you walked out of it triumphantly. And thank you, Jesus, for your patience, that you desire no one to be you desire no one to perish, and you patiently wait for those who are running from you to come near and put their trust in you. See, when you look back and you're thankful for what he's done, you're reminded of what you want him to do in and through you. So let me just end by asking you, hey, if you're here tonight and you consider yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, what do you need to filter your life with going into the break? Like, this is not a message that any follower of Jesus Christ should be able to walk out the door and be like, I didn't get anything out of that tonight. Like, there are 7 different realities that we talked about tonight. And we all need to take a step. What will it be for you? What do you need to filter your life with? And let me just ask you, if there's any brokenness in relationships in your life, will you just take a step? If you need to call someone up and ask for their forgiveness, will you do that? If you need to extend forgiveness to someone, will you do that? And then if you're here tonight and you don't have a relationship with Jesus Christ, this talk tonight is going to sound completely foolish to you. Because I can't ask you to show somebody that you've never seen. Like until you see Jesus clearly, you're not going to want to show him in your life. But I hope tonight you're understanding that Jesus Christ loves you. He came to earth for you. He died on a cross for you. He rose from the dead for you. And what he wants to do is come into your life. He wants to crop out your sin and filter your life with his forgiveness. And that happens simply by putting your faith in him, by praying and inviting him into your life. Will you take a step? Will you take a step? Whoever you are. Tonight's not about changing reality. It's about reality changing us. Let's take a step together.